Megan Carter had always loved paperwork. She found peace in the neat rows of numbers, the clean lines of forms, and the simple joy of putting things in their proper place. At 23 years old, she had just finished her studies at the new Chicago School of Administration. Her dream was simple. She wanted a quiet desk job on a space station, processing permits and drinking tea while watching the stars drift by outside her window. When she received her acceptance letter to the Galactic Administrative Course, she cried happy tears. The job was perfect. She would work at Station 12, orbiting Neptune, helping alien visitors fill out their travel documents. It was boring work, and that was exactly what she wanted. No danger, no excitement. Just paperwork and peace. She packed her suitcase carefully. Business clothes in muted colors. Comfortable shoes for long days at a desk. A small collection of scented candles that reminded her of home. She said goodbye to her mother, promised to call every week, and boarded the shuttle with a smile on her face. The journey took 3 days. Megan spent most of it reading regulations and memorizing form codes. She wanted to be ready for her first day. She wanted to be the best paper pusher the Galactic Administrative Corps had ever seen. When the shuttle finally stopped and the doors opened, Megan stepped out with her rolling suitcase and her brightest smile. The smile froze on her face. This was not Station 12. This was not Neptune. This was not even close to anything she had expected. She stood on a platform made of black volcanic rock. The air was hot and smelled like sulfur. Above her, a red sun burned through a sky filled with ash clouds. In the distance, she could see mountains that glowed with molten fire. But the landscape was not what made her blood run cold. It was the other beings on the platform. They were massive, tall and covered in scales, with 4 arms each ending in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, like the eyes of snakes. They wore armor that seemed to grow from their own bodies, and they carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. These were Korathi. Megan recognized them from her studies. They were one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy. They had conquered 17 star systems through sheer violence. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They fought, and they won. And they were all staring at her. Megan looked down at herself. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighed 120 pounds. She was wearing a cardigan sweater and sensible flats. She was pulling a rolling suitcase decorated with small flowers. She looked like a snack. Synthetic voice boomed from speakers hidden somewhere above. Human designation Megan Carter. Report to Orientation Hall 7. Combat assessment begins in 90 standard minutes. Combat assessment. Those words did not belong in Megan's life. She pulled out her acceptance letter and read it again. The letter clearly said Galactic Administrative Course, Training Division 7, but at the top, stamped in dark red ink, was a symbol she had only seen in history books, the seal of the Varak Combat Academy. The Varak Academy was legendary, but not in a good way. It was where the deadliest warriors in the galaxy came to train. It was built on a volcanic moon called Ashakora, a place so hostile that simply surviving there was considered an achievement. The academy had been running for 300 years, and in that time, it had produced more famous killers than any other institution in known space. The death rate for first-year students was 43%. Nearly half of everyone who entered did not leave alive. And no human had ever been admitted. Ever. Humans were considered too soft, too weak, too peaceful to survive even the first day. Someone had made a terrible mistake. Somewhere in the vast machinery of the United Earth government, some tired worker had typed the wrong code, clicked the wrong button, and sent Megan Carter to her death. She should have panicked. She should have screamed for help, demanded to speak to someone in charge, insisted that this was all a horrible error. That would have been the reasonable response. Instead, Megan took a deep breath and straightened her cardigan. A huge Carthy walked past her, bumping her shoulder hard enough to spin her around. She stumbled but did not fall. The alien looked back at her and made a sound like rocks grinding together. It took her a moment to realize he was laughing. "Soft thing," he said in broken common, the trade language of the galaxy. "You will be dead before the sun sets." Megan looked up at him. He was 3 feet taller than her and probably weighed 5 times as much. His claws could open her from throat to belly with a single swipe. His eyes held nothing but contempt and cruel amusement. She smiled at him. It was not a friendly smile. It was not the polite expression she wore when helping customers at her old part-time job. It was something else entirely. Something old and patient and very, very dangerous. The Corthy stopped laughing. For just a moment, something flickered in his yellow eyes. Something that might have been uncertainty. "I suppose we will see," Megan said softly. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward Orientation Hall 7. Behind her, the Corthy watched her go. He told himself that the chill running down his spine was just the volcanic wind. Deep inside Megan's mind, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Something that humanity had tried very hard to forget about itself. Before humans built cities and wrote laws and created bureaucracies to organize their world, they had been something else. For 60,000 years, they had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They had survived ice ages and predators and diseases in each other. They had climbed to the top of their food chain not because they were the biggest or the fastest or the strongest, but because they simply refused to die. The galaxy knew humans as peaceful traders and efficient administrators. They saw soft skin and small bodies and assumed weakness. They did not know about the thing that lived inside every human, the inheritance of countless generations of survivors. Megan had spent her whole life keeping that thing asleep. She had buried it under paperwork and regulations and polite smiles. She had chosen to be soft because being hard frightened her, but someone had made a clerical error, and now she was walking into a school for killers, with nothing but a rolling suitcase and a cardigan and 60,000 years of evolution whispering in her blood. The old thing opened its eyes and smiled with her mouth. This was going to be interesting. Night came slowly to Ashkara. The volcanic moon had long days, and the red sun seemed to hang in the sky forever before finally sinking below the burning mountains. When darkness finally arrived, it was complete. The only light came from the rivers of lava in the distance and the faint blue glow of the moss that grew everywhere. Megan sat in her room and tried to feel normal. The room was a small cell carved from black rock. There was a sleeping platform that was too hard, a shelf that was too small, and nothing else. Her suitcase looked ridiculous in the corner, its cheerful flower pattern completely wrong for this place. She had unpacked one of her scented candles and set it on the shelf. It smelled like vanilla, like home, like the person she had been before today. She had not lit it. Something told her that the old Megan who loved candles and paperwork was not the Megan who survived this. PLACEA knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a Theshan standing in the hallway. He was short by the standards of most species here, only about 5 feet tall, but he was built like a boulder. His skin was gray and rough like stone, and his eyes were large and dark, designed to see in the lightless minds where his people had evolved. "I am Groth," he said. His voice was deep, so deep it seemed to vibrate in Megan's chest. "May I enter?" She stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the middle of her small room, looking at her with those dark, mying eyes. "You are not what you pretend to be," he said. "No one is." "That is not what I mean." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. There are stories among my people. Very old stories, from before we joined the galactic community. We did not always live underground. Once, we lived on the surface, and we traded with other species who came to our world. Megan listened silently. One species came more than others. They called themselves humans. They were small and soft like you. They smiled often and spoke gently. They wanted to trade, nothing more. My ancestors thought they were harmless. What happened? A misunderstanding. A young Deshan killed a human trader over a disputed payment. It was wrong, but it happened. And then, Groth's voice trailed off. And then? The humans stopped smiling. They came back with no weapons, no armor, nothing but their soft bodies and their strange endurance. They hunted the killers through our caves and tunnels. Not for hours. Not for days. For weeks. Megan felt the old thing stir inside her, listening with interest. My ancestors were miners. We could see in total darkness. We knew every tunnel, every passage, every hiding place. It should have been impossible for surface dwellers to catch us. But the humans did not stop. They did not sleep. They did not tire. They simply kept coming, following our people through the darkness like ghosts. How did it end? They caught the killers. Every single one. And then they apologized for the unpleasantness and offered new trade agreements. Groth's dark eyes fixed on Megan. My grandmother told me this story when I was very young. She said we should never forget what lived behind those soft faces. She said humanity was not a young species learning to be civilized. She said humanity was a very old thing pretending to be young. A predator wearing the skin of prey. The silence stretched between them. Is it true? Groth asked. What you really are? Megan thought about her life before today. She thought about her desk job drinks, her scented candles, her desire for a quiet and peaceful existence. She thought about how hard she had worked to be soft, to be gentle, to be the kind of person who solved problems with paperwork instead of violence. And she thought about today, about how easily the old thing had woken up, about how natural it had felt to fight, to hunt, to win. Humans became peaceful because we had to, she said finally. We looked at our history and saw what we were capable of. The wars, the destruction, the terrible things we did to each other and to our world. We decided to be something else. Every law, every treaty, every boring bureaucracy, they are all cages we built to contain ourselves. And you? I was a very good paper pusher. I loved my desk. I loved my forms. I loved being part of the cage. She paused. But someone put the wrong file in the wrong folder. And now I am here. And the old thing is awake. Groth nodded slowly. He did not seem afraid, exactly. More like a miner who had discovered an unexpected vein of something valuable and dangerous. There is something you should know, he said. The other students are planning to kill you. Tonight while you sleep. 3 Carthi and 2 Zelvari. They believe you are a threat that must be eliminated before training truly begins. Thank you for warning me. What will you do? Megan's smile returned. It was the same smile she had worn in the assessment chamber, the smile that made predators feel like prey. I will let them come. Groth studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound, like an earthquake in miniature. I believe I will enjoy watching your career here, he said. If you survive the night, I would like to train with you. If I survive the night, I would like that too. He left, and Megan was alone again with her unlit candle and her flower suitcase and the old thing humming happily in her blood. She did not sleep. Instead, she lay on her hard sleeping platform and waited. She listened to the sounds of the academy settling into night. She heard the distant rumble of volcanic activity. She heard the soft footsteps of students moving through corridors. And finally, around midnight, she heard what she had been waiting for. 5 sets of footsteps, moving quietly, but not quietly enough. They stopped outside her door. Megan slipped off her platform and moved to the small window. It was barely large enough to squeeze through, but she was small, and she had always been flexible. In seconds, she was outside, clinging to the volcanic rock, the hot wind whipping her hair. Below her, the Academy's tunnels opened into the mountainside. Old passages, carved long before the Academy existed, leading deep into the volcanic moon. Perfect hunting grounds. She dropped from the wall and landed silently. Behind her, she heard her door crash open. She heard angry voices, confused voices, voices that did not understand how prey could disappear. The old thing laughed inside her. This was going to be fun. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in her life, Megan Carter was not the one being hunted. She was the hunter, and she had been waiting for this moment for 60,000 years. The tunnels beneath the Varak Academy had existed for millions of years. They were carved by ancient lava flows, twisted and turned by volcanic forces that made the moon's core a churning ocean of molten rock. No one had mapped them completely. No one had tried. They were too deep, too hot, too dangerous. They were perfect. Megan moved through the darkness like a ghost. She had no light, but she did not need one. Her eyes adjusted slowly, finding shapes in the faint glow that leaked from cracks in the rock where magma flowed beneath. The heat was intense, worse than the hottest summer days she remembered from Texas, but her body adjusted. It sweated, it cooled itself. It did what human bodies had evolved to do over countless generations. Behind her, 5 hunters followed. The 3 Karathi were the loudest. Their heavy bodies made the ground shake slightly with each step, and their breathing was harsh in the hot air. The 2 Zelvari were quieter, faster, but even they made sounds that Megan's ears could track. They thought they were hunting her. They were wrong. The first hour was about understanding the terrain. Megan explored as she moved, building a map in her head. She noted where the tunnels branched, where the heat became unbearable, where the rock was stable, and where it crumbled. She found a passage that circled back on itself, a chamber with 3 exits, a narrow squeeze that would slow the larger Karathi. Her hunters spread out to corner her. They communicated with low clicking sounds, coordinating their search. They were trained soldiers, working as a unit, covering each other's weaknesses. But they made a crucial mistake. They assumed she would run straight, try to escape, seek an exit back to the surface. They did not understand that she had no intention of leaving these tunnels until the hunt was finished. The second hour was about patience. Megan found a small alcove and wedged herself into it, becoming perfectly still. The old thing inside her settled into calm readiness. Humans were not just endurance hunters. They were also ambush predators when they needed to be. They could wait in absolute stillness for hours, days if necessary, until prey wandered close enough to strike. A Zelvari passed within 3 feet of her hiding spot. She could hear his breathing, see the faint gleam of his eyes in the darkness. He was scanning for movement, for heat signatures, for any sign of his target. He did not look up. He did not check the small spaces. He assumed that nothing could hide so close without being detected. Megan let him pass. Not yet. The time was not right. The third hour was about breaking them. She began to move again, but differently now. She made small sounds, just loud enough to be heard. She let them catch glimpses of her, brief flashes of movement that drew them deeper into the tunnels, further from the academy, deeper into the heat. The Karathi were struggling. Their scales were designed for temperature regulation, but only to a point. The volcanic heat was overwhelming their systems. They moved slower now, their breathing labored. Their steps heavy. One of them collapsed. Megan watched from the shadows as his companions tried to wake him. He was not dead, just overcome by heat exhaustion. His body had simply given up. They had to choose between carrying him back to the surface or continuing the hunt. They left him. The hunt was more important than a fallen comrade. This told Megan everything she needed to know about her remaining pursuers. They were dedicated, ruthless, and increasingly desperate. The fourth hour was about fear. Megan began to hunt in earnest now. She appeared behind them, making sounds that echoed through the tunnels, impossible to locate. She found their trail and followed it, then circled around to approach from unexpected directions. The Zelvari were the first to crack. They started seeing threats everywhere, jumping at shadows, striking at empty air. One of them made a mistake in the darkness, stepped onto unstable rock, and fell into a crevasse. His scream echoed through the tunnels for a long time before it stopped. 3 hunters left. 2 Korthi and 1 Zelvari. They grouped together now, moving as a tight unit, watching each other's backs. This was smart, but it was also slow. And Megan was not slow. The 5th hour was about ending it. The remaining hunters reached the chamber, where 3 tunnels met. They stopped there, setting up a defensive position, waiting for dawn when the surface would be cooler, and they could retreat with honor. Megan did not give them until dawn. She came from above, dropping from a ledge she had scouted earlier. Her first strike hit the Zelvari in the cluster of nerves at the base of his skull, the same spot she had used in the assessment. He dropped without a sound. The Korthi turned, but they were slow. So slow. The heat had stolen their strength, and fear had stolen their focus. Megan moved between them, striking at joints and pressure points, using their own size against them. In 30 seconds, it was over. All 3 lay on the ground, alive but unable to move. Megan crouched beside them, not even breathing hard. She leaned close to each one in turn and whispered the same words. "Go home. Tell everyone what you saw here. Tell them humanity remembers." She left them there and began the long walk back to the surface. The tunnels that had seemed so confusing when she entered were clear in her mind now. Every turn memorized, every passage mapped. The old thing was satisfied, settling back into sleep like a cat after a successful hunt. Dawn was breaking when Megan walked into the Academy's main dining hall. She was covered in volcanic dust. Her cardigan was torn beyond repair. Her hair was wild, and there was a cut on her cheek that she did not remember receiving. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to watch her. She picked up a food tray and began selecting breakfast items as if nothing unusual had happened. Behind her, the door opened again, and the 3 surviving hunters limped in. They did not look at her. They did not look at anyone. They went directly to the medical wing without speaking. The 4th Korthi, who had collapsed from heat, was already there, recovering. The Zelvari, who had fallen into the crevasse, had been found and pulled out, badly injured but alive. All 5 of her would-be killers had survived. Megan had made sure of that. Dead enemies were quickly forgotten. Living enemies who had been beaten, humiliated, and sent home with a message, those were remembered. Commandant Rethver watched from his elevated platform. His single eye studied Megan with new interest. When she looked up at him, he nodded once, slowly. Groth appeared beside her, carrying his own tray. His stone-gray face showed something that might have been a smile. "You survived the night," he said. "I did. Shall we train together after breakfast?" Megan bit into something that might have been fruit or might have been meat. She was too tired to care. "Yes," she said. "I think we shall." The old thing hummed contentedly in her blood, and Megan Carter smiled her dangerous smile. 4 years passed on the volcanic moon of Ashara. They were hard years, brutal years, years that tested Megan Carter in ways she had never imagined possible. The Varak Academy did not become easier after that first night. If anything, it became harder. The instructors pushed her more, expected more, demanded more. They had seen what she could do, and they wanted to see how far she could go. She learned things that no bureaucrat should ever know. She learned 17 different ways to kill with her bare hands. She learned how to read a battlefield in seconds, how to predict an enemy's movements, how to turn any object into a weapon. She learned the fighting styles of 12 different species, and found ways to use each one's strengths against them. But she also learned other things. She learned that the Korathi were not just mindless warriors. They had complex honor codes and deep family bonds. She learned that the Zelvari prized beauty and art alongside their deadly skills. She learned that every species, no matter how fierce, had more to them than violence, and she made friends. Groth the Deshan became her training partner and closest companion. He taught her the patience of stone, the art of waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In return, she taught him the human philosophy of adaptation, the willingness to change tactics instantly when circumstances shifted. Vethkar, a female Korathi whose scales shimmered with unusual blue patterns, became her rival and eventually her friend. They fought each other dozens of times over 4 years, and the score remained nearly even. Vethkar taught Megan to embrace overwhelming force when necessary. Megan taught Vethkar that sometimes the smallest movements carried the most power. Even Commandant Rethfer changed his view of the small human. In her 3rd year, he called her to his office, a rare honor that usually meant either exceptional praise or expulsion. "You should not exist," he told her bluntly. His single eye studied her with something between respect and confusion. "Humans are administrators, traitors, paper pushers, as you call it. You should have died in the first week. Yet here I am. Yet here you are." He leaned back in his chair, his old joints creaking. "I have trained warriors for 130 years. I have seen every species, every fighting style, every approach to combat. I thought I understood what made a warrior. Then you came. What do I show you that you did not understand? That we have been fools." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We looked at humanity and saw soft bodies. We saw peaceful intentions. We saw a young species playing at civilization. We did not see what was underneath. Most humans do not see it either. We try very hard not to look. Why? Why cage such power?" Megan thought about the question carefully. It deserved a careful answer. "Because we are afraid of it," she said finally. "We know what we can do. We know what we have done. Every terrible war, every cruelty, every dark moment in our history, we remember them all. The cage is not just to protect others from us. It is to protect us from ourselves." Rethfer was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly, thoughtfully. "You may be the wisest species I have ever encountered," he said, "and also the most terrifying. Go. Continue your training. Make me proud." Graduation came on a day when the volcanic sky burned especially bright. Megan stood among her class, the survivors of 4 brutal years. Of the 64 who had started, only 31 remained. Some had died. Most had simply failed and been sent home. Megan finished 3rd in the class, behind Vethkar in 1st and Groth in 2nd. She had not tried for the top spot. She did not need it. What she had needed was to prove that humans belonged here, and she had done that beyond any doubt. After the ceremony, Groth and Vethkar found her watching the sunset over the lava fields. "What will you do now?" Groth asked. "I received a message this morning. From Earth. The people who made the clerical error?" Megan smiled. "They never did correct it. For 4 years, some poor official has been trying to figure out how to explain that they sent an administrator to a combat school. I think they gave up. So what did the message say?" There is a department that does not officially exist. They call it the Office of Special Circumstances. They handle problems that cannot be solved through normal channels. She paused. They offered me a job. Vethkar made a rumbling sound of approval. You will take it. I will. Then we will see each other again. The big Karthi reached out and pressed her clawed hand against Megan's shoulder. The galaxy is smaller than it seems. Especially for people like us. People like us, Megan repeated. I like the sound of that. They said their goodbyes, and Megan boarded a shuttle back to human space. As the moon of Ashkara shrank behind her, she thought about everything that had happened since that first confused step off a shuttle 4 years ago. She had been sent here by mistake, by a clerical error, by someone who clicked the wrong button on a boring day at work. She should have died in the first hour. Instead, she had become something new. Not the old Megan who loved paperwork and candles, but not entirely the cold thing that lived in human blood either. Something in between. Something balanced. The galaxy would hear about what had happened at the Varric Academy. Stories would spread, as stories always do. The Karthi would tell their offspring about the small human who hunted 5 warriors through volcanic tunnels. The Zelvari would whisper about the prey that became a predator. The Deshans would nod knowingly and remember their grandmother's warnings. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy would begin to understand what humanity really was. Not a young species learning to be civilized. Not a harmless collection of administrators and traders. But something very old, something very patient, something that had chosen peace because it knew exactly how terrible the alternative could be. Megan looked out the shuttle window at the stars streaming past. Somewhere out there, problems were brewing that would require special circumstances. Somewhere out there, beings were making plans that assumed humanity was weak. She smiled her old smile, the one that made predators feel like prey. They were about to learn better. The clerical error that had sent Megan Cotter to the galaxy's deadliest academy had been a mistake. But sometimes mistakes become something else. Sometimes they become exactly what was needed. And sometimes, a girl who just wanted to push. Papers ends up reminding the universe why humanity survived 60,000 years of evolution. Not because they were gentle. Because they chose to be. And they could always choose differently. The orientation hall was a massive chamber, carved directly into the volcanic rock. The walls were black and rough, and they absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Blue glowing moss grew in patches along the ceiling, providing just enough illumination to see. The air was thick and hot, making every breath feel like work. 64 new students stood in the center of the chamber. They came from 12 different species, each one bred for combat over thousands of years. The Karathi were the largest, 8 feet tall, with their 4 clawed arms and armored scales. The Zelvari were smaller but faster, their bodies sleek and angular like blades given living form. The Deshans were short but incredibly dense. Their bodies packed with muscle developed from generations of mining in high-gravity worlds. And then there was Megan. She stood among them in her cardigan and sensible shoes. Her flower-decorated suitcase left at the entrance because no one had told her where else to put it. She was smaller than everyone by a significant margin. She looked like a child standing among giants. The other students stared at her, with expressions ranging from confusion to hunger. Some of them looked at her the way a cat looks at a wounded bird. Easy prey. A warm-up before the real challenges began. Megan ignored them. She was too busy watching. She watched how the Karthi moved, noting that their size made them slow to turn. She observed the Zelvari and saw how they shifted their weight before striking, a tiny tell that gave away their intentions. She studied the Deshans and noticed they protected their joints carefully, suggesting those were weak points. She had always been good at noticing details. In her administrative training, She had learned to spot errors in documents that others missed. Now she applied that same skill to something very different. A platform rose from the far end of the chamber. On it stood an ancient Karathi whose scales had faded to gray with age. He was missing one eye, the socket covered with a metal plate. His remaining eye swept across the gathered students with cold evaluation. "I am Commandant Rethfer," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones being crushed. "For 300 years, this academy has trained the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known. You are here because your species believes you have potential. Most of you are wrong." He paused, letting that statement sink in. 43% of first-year students do not survive. This is not a threat. It is simple fact. The weak die here. The strong become legends. His single eye found Megan in the crowd. His lip curled with disgust. "There has been an administrative error. A human has been sent to us by mistake. However, the law of Ashara is clear. Once a student's feet touch our soil, they cannot be transferred or removed. They must complete the program or die trying." Some students laughed. Others made sounds of anticipation, like predators scenting blood. "The human will participate in all trials. The human will most likely die. This is acceptable." Megan kept her face calm. Inside, the old thing that had awakened stretched like a cat preparing to hunt. "First trial begins now," Rethfer announced. "Individual combat. Names will be called at random. 2 students fight until one cannot continue. Killing is permitted but not required. Begin." The first matches were brutal. Megan watched each one carefully, filing away information. A Karathi fought a Zelvari and won through sheer power, but Megan noticed he had been tagged 3 times before landing his finishing blow. A Deshan fought another Deshan in a grinding battle of endurance that lasted 20 minutes. 2 Zelvari moved so fast their fight was over in seconds. When her name was finally called, the chamber fell silent. Her opponent was a Zelvari named Kethsar. He was famous even among the new students. His family had produced 17 academy champions over the centuries. He moved with liquid grace, and his eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. He looked at Megan with something close to pity. "I will make this quick," he said. "You should not suffer." Megan walked to the center of the fighting circle. She did not take a stance. She did not raise her hands. She just stood there, relaxed and waiting, with that strange smile on her face. A tone sounded, signaling the start of the match. Kethsar moved. He was incredibly fast, faster than anything Megan had ever seen. His strike was aimed at her throat, precisely calculated to knock her unconscious without killing her. It was a mercy blow, designed to end the embarrassment quickly. He hit empty air. No one saw Megan move. One moment she was in front of him, and the next she was behind him. Her elbow drove into a cluster of nerves at the base of his skull, a spot she had identified by watching his species move throughout the day. Kethsar dropped like a stone. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Megan stood over her fallen opponent, breathing normally, her cardigan slightly dusty but otherwise undisturbed. She looked up at Commandant Rethfer. "Next," she said. The next opponent was a Karathi. He was angry now, his pride wounded by what had happened to Kethsar. He charged at her with all 4 arms swinging. A whirlwind of claws and fury. Megan stepped inside his reach, where his long arms could not find proper leverage. She struck once, twice, 3 times at joints and pressure points. The Karathi's arms went limp. She swept his legs out from under him, and he crashed to the ground. Next, by the 5th fight, no one was laughing anymore. By the 7th, some students were actively backing away when Megan looked at them. She did not fight with any single style. Each opponent faced something different. Against the fast ones, she was patient. letting them tire themselves out before striking. Against the strong ones, she was precise, targeting weaknesses instead of matching power with power. Against the armored ones, she was creative, finding gaps and soft spots that their species had forgotten were vulnerable. The old thing inside her was singing with joy. It had been caged for so long, buried under paperwork and civilization and the desperate human desire to be better than their nature. Now it was free, and it remembered everything. It remembered that humans had not survived 60,000 years by being gentle. It remembered that beneath every polite smile was a predator that had clawed its way to the top of its food chain through sheer, stubborn violence. When the assessment finally ended, Megan stood alone in the center of the circle. Her cardigan was torn. There was dust in her hair. But she was breathing normally, and her smile had never faded. Commandant Rethver stared at her for a long moment. The disgust in his eye was gone. What replaced it was something far more unsettling. Recognition. He nodded once, slowly, and Megan nodded back. The other students kept their distance as they filed out of the chamber. They no longer looked at her like prey. They looked at her like a bomb that might explode at any moment. Megan collected her flower-decorated suitcase and went to find her room. It was going to be an interesting 4 years.